driven by Jackie Stewart to World Championship win. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and I'll be looking at a classic Tamiya kit. This is the Tyrrell 003 in 1/12 scale. Now, the Tyrrell 003 is one of the earlier Tyrrell cars that was racing in the Formula 1 series, and is their most successful car to date. Now, this was driven by Jackie Stewart, and it is pretty much the same as the 001 that was designed in 1970, and it was improved with some slightly different aero on the front, and also a narrower chassis, and I think the rear aero was a bit different as well. There was a 002 chassis as well, and that was pretty much the same thing, but that was designed for Jackie Stewart's teammate Cevert, and it was slightly different because they built the chassis to match the heights of the drivers. All in all, the essence is pretty much the same sort of car, but they're the different chassis numbers, pretty much, or design. Okay, let's have a closer look at the box. All right, so from the top camera, you can see the box art there, very classical box art. It's like that. Now you've got Jackie Stewart, he's inside here. Now the original versions of these would have included the driver figure as well. Now with the new re-releases, the figure has been omitted, and I would say that most of the time, people didn't add the figures to these anyway because they looked a bit funky. And definitely it does look good just as a car chassis alone. Okay, so what's different about this re-release? What they've included is all the original parts. They're all the same, but these metal stalks are included as metal wire. There's photo etch for wing plates and other really fine details such as the cowling clasps. Also, there's a stainless steel photo etch, as in fully polished, which is for the mirrors. And there's also decals which have been printed by Cartograph of Italy, so they're really high quality. So hence the Cartograph symbol right there. Okay, let's crack it open and have a closer look inside. All right, nice full box of bits. Got lots of chrome parts, they're all there. Black parts and then body colored blue parts as well. And this blue was the very early number, TS4 blue. Got some rubber tires and some other bits and pieces. So let's put this aside over here and we'll have a closer look at each bag as we go. Let's have a look at this. This one is the upper cowling. Do a bit of a zoom in there. Always got the focus a bit funky here, there we go. All right, so you will notice that this is a very, very early kit. You're talking about a 1970s era kit here, and the tooling is from that time as well. And for a basically, almost 50-year-old kit, you can see how clean it is. There's no flash at all. There are certain areas which you can see when I'm going through the reflection, the natural sink marks, and across here as well. That's just a phenomenon of injection molding because the material is as molten plastic as it goes in, and depending on the thickness of the part, they shrink at different rates as it cools at different rates. So obviously underneath there, you'll see they've got those shapes there. It's not a great problem. All you need to do is sand that down. You may need a little bit of primer to help you do so, and then you'll get a flawless finish. The rest of it is pretty clean. Got the bulges there. So that bulge there from memory would be to accommodate the gear shift. Because you can imagine you're holding onto the gear shift and you need to move your arm like such. That's where you can move it in that area there. Okay, so there's the cowling. Looks pretty good, still pretty well polished. Let's pop that over here. All right, now we've got this larger sprue bag. It's got a couple of things in it. Okay, we have the wheels. So these are the rear wheels. Actually, it's both. There's the front and the rear there. Exhausts. And then we've got the intake as well. I guess it's probably easier to visualize like that. So that's the intake just at the back of the driver's seat. A few struts as well. And there's a bulkhead right there. It's at the front actually that supports the brake boosters, maybe, I think. Looks like that. There's your wheels. Okay, so from this side. And again, really clean. Even with the lines, won't be that much cleaning involved either. The mold lines. Okay, so there's a big chunky bit. Alright, what else was in that bag? Then we've got some soft sort of PVC bits. See how flexible the seat is? So what we've got here is the molded seat. So it's going to be like this. That's the back, of course. And then this is the cover for the instrument panel. And I think these could be parts of the shocks there. And that, I'm guessing, may be a headrest. Some little rubbery parts there. And from this close-up, you can just see how flexible all this is. Nice leather texture there too. Don't know if it was actually leather, but it's got that sort of feel to it. Okay, moving along, we've got a section of body components. We've got the front wing, and it gives you an impression of how massive this front wing is. This is one of those parts that I really like the looks of. You've got the rear wing panels, some body panels here around the back of the engine bay area. You've got some heads here. So I noticed that there's actually two sets of engine heads which are supplied, and these are the ones you'll be using. These have the holes that go all the way through. And that's because the tubing that's being used is pressed all the way through the centers there. There is another one which is in a black sprue, I'll show you later, and that actually has the nipples there so that the ends of the tubing was glued onto that. I think these have been enhanced at some stage. And then you've got some more plates. And then, I don't know if you can see, let's see if we can get the reflection. There are some rivet details within these panels as well. They're not totally flat. And there's part of the huge wing. So you can see there's still some shrink lines there. I can't actually feel it, but they're definitely there. So if you sanded that, you'll see that. A little bit of filler, some primer, and that'll be all fixed. It'll be nice and flat. And on the other side, there's really not much detail there. Okay, so that's the wing sections. And then we get into some of the engine components. Sort of traditional for Tamiya to have the engine components in a silvery grey colour. So we have all the engine components as well as the gearbox. Okay, so you got engine block sections there. Intake here. You can see that's where the trumpets are going to go, around there. Gearbox covers and diff. I think that's a front radiator. And then the radiators also have the photo etch details as well to add extra mesh detail. There's the trumpets here. Can't remember what you call this stack. Some tanks. These would be brake boosters. Part of a bulkhead there as well. Now let's just get in close and I'll show you what the detail on the engine components is like. It's pretty crisp. You imagine these are all cast, and look at the reinforcing ribs around that differential. Really nice and thin, and then you've got the reinforcing there as well for the gearbox case. Over here you've got some of those side details. The top of that V8. And then there's some pumps. Okay, now over here this is part of the back of the engine, so that's part of the engine mount system for the chassis. Okay, from there we've got a section of black parts. And you've got a lot of suspension components. Here's the other heads I was talking about. And if I zoom in on there, well, I'll do my standard focus on my thumb thing. There we go. Is that good? There we go. If I bring it back here, now you see how there's no holes going through these heads. So they've got the nipples on the top there. So these are not the ones you'll be using. Got some radiators there. Bit of a boulder section. You got your steering wheel. Some suspension bulkheads. I think that's part of the tank. Another radiator. There's the instrument cluster. That's better, it's a bit sharper. And then this appears to be part of a stand. And we'll see that going together in the first steps of the manual. You've got the rear uprights where you have all the suspension rods connected. You've got your front uprights right there, steering, and you notice that these have sort of connection points so that the steering will actually move. There's actually a rack and pinion system for the steering, so it will move with the steering wheel as well. Part of a bulkhead there. And then we go back, here's the other radiator grills. Okay, and parts of the axles here, I think. Okay, so black parts. We'll move along. We've got this bag full of the special small detail parts. We've got the tyres. And then we have screws and such. All right, so if we have a closer look at these tyres, you can see the detail on these. Tread detail. So there's the fronts. So naturally you're going to have the mold line down the center, and that's quite easy to sand off. And sanding across the whole surface actually makes it look more realistic as well. It gives that scrubbed look. And there's the rears. So there's Goodyears molded in the sides as well. Okay, so they're the tyres. Let's shift those over there. We have a bag of screws. Also nuts in there. This little bag holds all those fine wires for the mirror supports. So there's 3 on each side. And over here we've got the bag of vinyl tubing and springs. So the springs are actually working in the suspension. They coil over shock absorbers, so they actually compress. And here we have the steering shaft with the pinion gear on the end, which is going to drive the rack to operate the front wheels. All this adds quite a lot of interest because it has an exposed engine. You'll be seeing all of this. Okay, from there, we've got, let's just zoom that out a bit. So this is quite a large sprue of chrome parts. We've got the ventilator discs, so they're in 2 parts, so that when they're glued together, you'll see the drilled out sections. Suspension components here, these are all the rear trailing arms. You've got front arms here, the lower front arms. These are probably the front discs, I guess, because the ventilator would have been for the rear. Sway bars, sway bar links, calipers, front arms here. And then there's shock absorbers as well. So if we're getting close, again you can see how clean this is. The mold lines are very minimal. And one of the pain points with chrome parts is, in the old days, you used to cut them and then you try to touch up these areas where they're attached as a sprue, and quite often you can't get the matching color because silver just looked gray. But now there's plenty of products such as Molito or Green Stuff, SMS. It's very easy to trim those off. You can sand them down properly and then touch them up, and you'll barely notice that the chrome's gone. If you really die hard, you can actually take all the chrome off and then respray it with a chrome as well. That way you can actually sand down all the mold lines. Even though the mold lines are very, very minimal, they're still noticeable. So again, if you're a die-hard, I think if you're just building this for the pleasure of it, that's a lot more trouble than it's worth. Okay, so calipers, there's a sway bar, you can see there. Super smooth, very glossy finish. And actually with the disc brakes, there will be photo etch that goes over them as well. You can see how these are the open C type design. So these will just clip over whatever component it is, so they're suspension components. So it allows all the suspension to move. So those arms there. Super shiny. Okay, so that's this set of chrome sprues. There is another, which is this one. Oh, this one's still got a staple in it. Let's open that up. This staple doesn't want to let go. All right, let's take this out. All right, another quite fine sprue. You can see the machining again, super clean, no flash at all for a 50-year-old kit. We've got the hosing here to the front radiator, to the rear engine. Various plumbing here for the engine as well. We have a rollover hoop for the driver. There'll be injection parts. You've got the trumpets there, they're the engine trumpets. Some more exhaust. And we'll do a bit of a zoom in there, just to have a closer look at all these details. There's a rollover hoop. You can see how clean that is. Very shiny chrome as well. And it's not thick chrome. Thick chrome is just a real dog. It covers up all the details. It's quite ugly. Here we go, there's the trumpets. There's 4 trumpets along here. And then there's some more on this side. Exhaust ends. Some bulkheads. So these are the original mirror supports, and they're definitely not as good as having some highly shiny wire, which is probably stainless steel. The exhaust tips. And then we go back across here. It's really nice, really clean. Okay, what have we got left? We've got the base of the chassis. So I guess you would call this sort of like the floor pan. So the number of this kit is 12009, which means it's a knife kit out of the 112 series. So it's one of the younger kits, so hence its age. So here I can actually see the stamp, 1973, when it was actually cut. Now on the bottom you can see there's some really nice rivet detail. Look at the reflection, right? So that's coming through. And then that's where we can see the year right there. So all in all, it's quite a nice mold for its age. I'll probably say that in a lot, but I mean, when you see it, I mean, that is very crisp. See some other brands and they'll be flash all over the place. Really clean. So there's parts of the space frame in there as well. And hence, because it's molded there, that's why you have a little bit of sinking mark there as well. So you can even leave that because you won't see that really. It's on the bottom of the chassis, but if you're really pedantic, you can fill that in. Okay, so there's the bottom of the chassis. And then there's our final bag of sprue. Oh no, there's another one there, there's clear parts. So here's the inner part of the chassis. This is the cockpit. And you see these little cutouts here. This is for the driver's arms. We've got the bottom of the front wing. This is the front bulkhead to the upper suspension arms. Some tanks, and then there's a cluster for the instruments. See all those components components there. So again, really clean. See some rivet detail in there. One of the tanks. There's rivets in there as well. And then all those rivets on this chassis, the monocoque. Super nice, I like it. Even though it's an old kit, it's definitely a classic. And it's still going to be a really nice model when it's complete. Okay, and then we finish off with the clear parts. So we've got the windscreen here. Might be a bit difficult to see. Is going to help? That's not going to help at all. But it's quite a simple looking windscreen. It's quite square in its features, and then here is a remnant of the driver figure. So that's the visor for the driver figure, which you don't get anymore, but you will be using this windscreen here. Okay, so that's all the plastic bits. Now we get to see the extra bits that are included, and also we'll be going through the manual. Okay, so this is one of the important parts. This is the photo etch components. So we've got the covers for the discs. Maybe a bit difficult to see there, but there's all these concentric lines, so it gives the impression of the worn disc surface. We've got some hold downs for the engine, which ones are they? That's these ones here. They're the engine mounts on the top. You've got the covers for the radiators. They're the rear wing end plates right there. Another radiator mesh there. Again, and then other sides of the other two discs. These are the body hold downs, really fine. And then we have the seatbelt buckle. Oh, I guess, what do you call that? That'll be the harness, is it? And more components here for that. So really very nice. Okay, so from there we have this bag here, which has got the decals. So this sheet here are the fabric seat belts. Got a lot of texture in them. You see the stitching has been printed in. They're self-adhesive. Then underneath are the Cartograph printed decals. Now I'm not going to take those out because they may get damaged. They're very thin and very crisp in their printing process. And the white would be very opaque. And you want that because you're going over a very dark blue color. And then on the back here, we've got the very highly polished stainless steel decals as well. So they're the mirrored finishes for the rear vision mirrors. There's a couple of round things there. We'll find out what they are in the instructions. Okay, so that's all the parts for the kit itself. Now let's have a look at the manual. So it's a large manual right there. We'll have to zoom out a little bit for that. Move that across. Okay, so old school manual, and you can see that the manual layouts haven't changed really very much. You've got some history across here, got the box art there. This has been changed though. Some of these bits have been added. So the original manuals didn't have this much detail on hints on building. Okay, again we've got hints, and then we start off with making the wheel wrench. And then there's a stand. So these actually look really good when they're just mounted on a stand with no wheels attached. And then we start building the car. So this is all the front end, front bulkhead. You've got the steering rack right across here. You've got the steering with the pinion attached to that point there. Then we have, let's just make sure this is all focused actually. That'll probably help. And then over here we start with the bottom of the chassis. These sections are added because these are the supports for the rear suspension, or the lower suspension arms, bulkhead going together. All the arms and that front sway bar bulkhead area is attached to the chassis. Start building the front shock absorbers with the rear or the bottom arms in place. These are the front uprights with the disc brakes. Oh, so actually the ventilated discs were at the front. should have known that. I mean, the front generally does more work. The front radiator with the photo etch cover. Start working on the interior of the chassis. Got the bulkhead here for the support of the seat. Little bulge on the bottom, or your pedals. Attachment of the internal part of the monocoque into the bottom chassis. You've got the tank bulkhead here. This is the piping for the cooling from the front radiator. Getting the fuel tanks, there's a rear rollover hoop. And then we start building the engine. So that starts off with the differential on the gearbox. There's actually a spacer in here for the drive shaft, because the drive shafts are going to be floating, which means the rear wheels will move independently, so it does feel like it's got a little bit of a differential movement. Engine gets mated up together with the gearbox, and you see the gear shift right there. We've got the disc brakes on the inboard discs, they're going in place. You've got the heads, all the rocker covers, all the water pumps, mounts across here, and then we start working on the exhausts, and then you've got the intakes. Oh, they call them throttle plates. Okay, so you've got your fuel lines going on. You've got the distributor with all the lines, and this starts getting a bit complicated because it is quite a balance of making sure you get all the tubing and all the fuel lines in the correct positions. And then you start working on the rear suspension. So rear uprights with the rear arms. You've got shocks and drive shafts. More radiators at the back. Piping for the radiators and the anti-roll bar. And then the mating of the engine to the chassis. And here we've got a piece of tubing. And to measure it up, you always have the true length, which is printed on the manual. So you don't need to use any rulers, you just measure it up to there, trim it into the right length, and it'll fit. Over here you see all those various, I guess, layers for the buckle. So that's a seat buckle. Let's zoom in there, you can see them. Look at all that. This is all the photo etch. And then you need to feed the seat belts, that fabric effect seat belt, through all of that. And then we do the seats. So you need to open up those seatbelt holes, and then the seatbelts are placed in there. Okay, so from here, the seat is mounted into the chassis. We've got the instrument cluster, some final plumbing with some tubing goes into place, so that's probably for throttle lines and such. More piping on that side. More in the rear of the engine, and then we start working on the wheels and the tires. Have those fitted in place, and this is where you use a wheel wrench that you put together as your very first step, as a screw the wheel nuts to attach the wheels onto the uprights. Rear wing with the photo etched end plates. And then the front wing. This is one of my favorite components of the car, the totally flat board front end. Got little winglets on the ends there. And then you start working on the body. There's the attachment points, which are the photo etch. There's your windscreen. The instructions on how to put together the rear vision mirrors. Okay, so you've got all those wires there. And then that's it. So the cowling is complete. That just presses in place. Front wing just presses into place. And that's it. So we end up with the decal diagrams. And you have all those different angles. And there we go. That is the Tyrrell 003 from 1971, which won the World Championship. So there it is. That is my review of the newly re-released Tamiya 1/12 scale Tyrrell 003 from 1971, which was driven by Jackie Stewart to World Championship win. So this includes photo etch parts, the metal wires for the rear vision mirrors, cartograph decals. That's it, which makes it really great. So give this a go. I don't think these would be around for very long. So the 6-wheeler was recently re-released, and it's nice to have this one with it as well. So there we go. The Tyrrell 003 from Tamiya in 12 scale. Now, if you like this review, please give me a like below. And if you'd like to see more content, please subscribe. So thank you very much for joining me.